Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome back to Homeopathy Hangout, where we have two of my lovely friends on today, Sonia, Osorio, and Manuela, Santiago, Teigeler. Did I say it right this time?
Teigeler.
Teigeler,
T.
tiger. You even, Sonia even said like tiger, and I said still went with Teigeler. Hello, ladies. Welcome to the podcast after long last.
Yes.
Yes, we're so
Happy to
happy
be
to be
here.
here. Yeah, excited.
We had a few recordings booked, and then I think the end of last year just went pear-shaped for me, and so we've had to cancel a few times. But we got to meet each other in person in Bali in September, and so it just feels like we're old buddies just hanging out, and other people just get to listen around the world, which is so cool, hey?
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh. Now, as with the tradition, I'd love to hear how you were first introduced to homeopathy before we talk about an absolutely amazing organization that you two have been so excited to share with our listeners. So, who wants to go first? Do you want to go paper, rock, scissors? Come on, do it, do it, do it. Paper, rock, scissors.
Rock, scissors.
Oh, did you both do scissors? Okay. Okay, Sonia, you start.
Okay.
I see this is going
Uh,
to take forever otherwise.
yeah. How did I get into homeopathy? I have a background in massage therapy and therapeutic yoga and meditation. And I was working a lot with people as a massage therapist and hearing a lot of stories that they were describing and they were talking about how they experienced their pain or how their pain started. And I realized that there's stories in the body. And I was thinking there has to be some way to address this beyond just physical touch. And then I attended a lecture at a local university, and it was by the founder of the homeopathy school that Manuela and I both studied at, actually. And she has a background in physics. She's a quantum physicist. So there was this whole, scientific way of presenting what homeopathy was. And I realized this is a medicine that can answer all the questions globally that my patients were experiencing, like where their pain started, what's the etiology, what are the symptoms. And I was fascinated. So out of nowhere, I just came home and asked my partner at the time, I'm going to study this medicine. And he said, What are you talking about? What is it? And I said, It's the answer to everything. But it was, for me, it was something that was grounded in science. It was something that could potentially alleviate pain, suffering, struggle, and confusion. And so it held deep practical and almost spiritual value for me.
That's beautiful. And you're welcome to name drop that college.
It's called MICH, MICH, the Montreal Institute of Classical Homeopathy.
With the incredible Julianne McNamara, who has
Exactly.
very generously donated to the podcast in the past. I had no idea. I just looked and I'm like, oh, somebody made a donation. Who is it? And checked that was her. And I had her on the podcast, and she is one of the most inspirational women I have ever met. And if you haven't listened to her podcast episode, I think there's three of them now because two of them were recorded like lectures of your college, and one was an
Mhm.
interview. Holy moly, she's incredible. And you ladies are so lucky to have studied with her. It's amazing,
Yeah.
amazing woman and
Yeah,
soul.
and Julianne teaches from wholeness. She teaches from and about wholeness, and I realized homeopathy is her tool to do that. And that's really
Mm,
what inspired me.
And I think her personal story as well. She's got an
Right.
incredible personal story of how she found homeopathy.
And
Uh,
Carla Marcel, also on your podcast, she talked about the HTSF complexes, the remedies specific to homeopath and
mm.
therapists without borders. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Manuela, you have such a busy life already. I don't know where you found time to study homeopathy and then go volunteer. I'm like, was lying in bed last night thinking, how does she do it? But anyway, maybe you can tell us a little bit about your story of how you found homeopathy.
Well, I'm definitely very energetic. That's for sure. It's funny. Homeopathy first came to me from a friend of mine whose name was also Sonia.
Oh,
She talked about it to me way before when I had kids, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it kind of was like a seed she planted in my mind. But what really brought me to homeopathy was once I had kids, and then I was like looking at my beautiful babies and being like, These are too perfect. Like, I can't, I want something that is as perfect as them. So I started getting more interested in homeopathy, and that was where I started actually studying it as a first line, like first aid course. But what totally blew me away was when my eldest was starting to have some very serious health issues. and also behavioral issues. And it was very, very worrisome. And that was my first true experience to seeing what one well-chosen remedy could do. And overnight, it changed everything for our family. And that is when I went, wait a second, what is this stuff? And I went to an open house at Mish, and I really felt like I had come home. I went to that open house and we talked about homeopathy, we talked about holism, we talked about, what is possible. And when we really sit in a place of holding space and seeing a human for all that they are, not just parts and pieces, but everything, and how that is the movement that we have, is we want to be whole. We want to be, in equilibrium, right? So yeah, that's what brought me to homeopathy, was really seeing the change that it could bring to someone that was really suffering, and this little boy that was really suffering, and just seeing him completely turn into this vibrant child, you know?
I
Yeah.
love that. And then somehow both of you just kept your passion alive and found HTSF. You're going to have to tell us what it is and how did it come across your path?
HTSF is actually something that we do hear about in the school as we're studying, because there's teachers that volunteer with, and our co-founders, right, with HTSF, that are in the school. So they come and they kind of tell us about it, and they give us some ideas of how homeopathy can be used in another way, because it's a classical school. So we do have the foundations of the classical homeopathy, but in HTSF, it's complexes. So it's a whole other way of using homeopathy, where you're mixing more than one remedy in one remedy.
Yeah.
Right? But I think just seeing what the work that they were doing around the world, because they have different projects, really inspired us. And then we wanted to be part of it, right?
Right.
So I
Yeah.
don't know.
So HTSF stands for Homeopaths and Therapists Without Borders. And what they did, the origins actually are in Africa, where the founder, Martine Jourde of HTSF, was working. And what she realized was that they had to get homeopathy into the hands of the people as quickly as possible without, and sometimes there were villages where people didn't know how to read or write. So they had to keep this simple. So they developed these complexes, what they call a first line of complexes, to treat conditions like upper or lower respiratory issues, food or waterborne pathogens. And each complex works as a signal. So it's not a bunch of remedies mixed together, but it's one signal to treat upper respiratory conditions, or one signal to treat intoxication by food or waterborne pathogens. And so people were able to use these in a practical way, not necessarily always as a substitute for healthcare, but to even get them to centers where they could get proper care. So they were able to actually save lives with that. So they could get to a rehydration center, let's say if they were suffering from, severe diarrhea, and be temporarily treated so that they could get to where they needed to get to.
When did the organization start? Or how long ago?
How long ago did it start?
I think
Do you know?
it was in the 90s.
Yeah, it's in the
We don't know the exact date, but the missions, I think what also spoke to me about what they do is that they actually really want to empower people and communities.
Mhm.
And something that Martin always says is that it's a bridge. It's a bridge. Homeopathy is a bridge between, communities, between people, between healthcare
Yeah.
professionals and people, between universities and communities. It's like, it just, that's the idea, is that we're not all separate again, right? We're together, and how can we all together thrive? So that's also the idea of empowering people by giving them tools that they can use. So training people, that's like one of the main things they do.
And they encourage this collaboration between professionals. So that's also what attracted us. I even hesitate to use the word mission. They're much more projects.
Yes, I
So
like that word better
yeah,
too.
so they're community development projects. And they're interested in uniting as many professionals, not necessarily just homeopaths now. So they're opening this up. So how can we all work collaboratively to support individual, family, community health?
Mm.
And that for me was the essence of one of the reasons I went to Cuba. I thought this kind of a vision holds the potential of what homeopathy and other modalities can do.
Amazing. I dropped out there for a little bit, you might have seen. And so, for anybody listening on the Rumble channel, if you're wondering why I'm sitting in a car, we're obviously traveling with my family. So, this first recording at 7 a.m. this morning, I'm doing in the car. So, if you said anything and maybe I looked a little bit strange while you said it, that would be why, because I was freaking, I was freezing. Tell me a little bit about your trip to Cuba. And when did you go and what was the mission and who went with you and just basically all the details. And if I freeze in a funny position, just keep talking.
Well, we went, it was about 2 years ago,
Hmm.
March, 2 years ago. And it was an interesting group because a lot of people that were going were homeopaths, but a lot of them also had other backgrounds like acupuncture or pharmacists. So it was interesting to get like a bit of a mix of people. And we actually went, it was just for a 1 week, and it was a training and collaborative like project where we were going to discover a bit what they had been working on, but we were also exchanging with them as professionals as to, what our knowledge and how we can support them. And it was headed by Martine herself and also Dr. Prado. So Dr. Prado is like a very well-known doctor in Cuba, and he is extremely innovative man. And it's hard to really talk about everything he does, but one of the things that he does is he works with dense water, which is the fourth state of water. And he uses dense water, but he also uses it with homeopathy, with aromatics, with light, with honey, with like, so it's really interesting because the way that they're using homeopathy in Cuba is very different from them what we're used to seeing. Like they do have classical homeopathy and like core remedies, but they also have the complexes, and then they also have this other project that was extremely interesting about epigenetic health.
Yeah, because everything is based on epigenetic health and this notion that how can medicine be adaptive to the needs of the people? So they're looking at the different ways that they can work with not just homeopathy, but like Manuela mentioned, different substances that they see as signalers. So they're talking from an epigenetic perspective. So you would use an herb as a signal or a homeopathic complex as a signal to create more fundamental change or to get the remedy in a deeper way. And they had to start working with the complexes because it was essential if homeopathy was going to be integrated into their health service. It had to reach as many people as possible in a very efficient way. And that was the reason for the complexes there.
Mm. And it was in Cuba that they had that really successful homeoprophylaxis with the leptospirosis in like 2007-ish, where they
Yeah.
homeopathically immunized 2.8 million people or something like that with like a something like 95% success rate.
And they used one of the HTSF complexes for the flu that they call norigrip, and they treated the H1N1
Mhm.
epidemic as well as the most recent one with COVID.
Oh, wow.
And what's really, really interesting, and I really want to mention this here, is that Cubans are extremely well organized. Sometimes people think that maybe, oh, they're not well organized because, it's not North America or Australia or whatever. But they actually back everything with research, and they
Mm.
really take the time to have it all written out. Like the data is there.
Mhm.
Like if people want data, this is a good place to go to because they have so much of it, and it's all really well organized, and they're very finicky about that. So I think it's really interesting to tell people also about that side of things because they find it's really important not only for it to be grounded in something that's very like because they want to know, does it work or does it or doesn't? Like they don't have time to lose, they don't have that much access to, like, for example, pharmaceuticals and stuff. So they need things that are going to be efficient, and they need things that are going to be efficient quickly and for large communities, because everything in Cuba is all about large communities. And that's one thing that's interesting because the founder of HTSF, Martin Joe, one of her backgrounds is in epidemiology. So
Mm.
she was well suited to kind of help the Cubans in that way with the complexes, to have that bigger vision of how do we get this into people's hands in a way that can be, at large. And everything that's in the universities, everything that's studied and found out goes straight back into the communities.
Mhm.
Like the knowledge that aren't kept at the university level or at the government level, Like it's obliged, like everyone that is a doctor, for example, is obliged to not only work at the university, but also go out into the communities.
Mm.
So everything is very like, it's different, I find, than a lot of our country, other countries where we're like kind of separated, you
Yeah.
know? And I love that image of when we were at the farm, because when we were there, we went to different places. We went to the
Children's Neurological Institute.
we went to the Matanzas Medical Institute, where, by the way, it was so healing as homeopaths because the whole, like all these busy doctors, like 40 of them, took time out of their day to come and greet us and thank us
Yeah.
as professionals, as health professionals,
Mm-hmm.
for coming to Cuba. And even the rector came and sat with us. And we were just like, oh my God, like it just was so validating to have that type of rapport with other medical health professionals. And I think that was what inspired me, anyhow, the most was like, it's amazing what we can do when we get out of our own ways and that we actually collaborate and we're going to put the people that we serve first.
Yeah, and that's their priority. One of the doctors even told us, he says, he says, medicine is not meant to stay in the universities, it's for the people. And
Well,
we saw that played out time and time again.
mm.
And when we were at the Children's Neurological Institute, they treat the entire family. Mothers and were coming there with their children. The dogs would be down on the ground playing with balls and stimulating the nervous system of the child and explaining to the mother what they had to do. It was so inclusive. So not just with us, but they bring the family into the healing picture.
That's amazing. I just want to add to that that Dr. Bracho from the Finlay Institute in
Right?
Cuba, who now lives in Australia, actually did a speech at the AHA conference in November 2020.
Hmm.
23 November 2023, and he explained exactly that, how organized they are. He had all the data of everything that they've ever homeopathically immunized with, and he was saying how they would get in a van and they drive here, and then the police, he said the police would even come, and then it was like the middle of the night and they had to, like, get all this done, and the police used their, megaphones and stuff to like call the whole town, and all of them came and met up. They made sure they're in lines, they all got their homeopathic remedies, and it was all done in a matter of days, that these millions of people were homeopathically immunized. So I would love to go see it myself in person. Like what you're saying just sounds incredible, and you're right, we don't have anything like that over here in Australia, and it sounds like not in Canada either.
And when we went to the farm, it's called Coincidencia Farm, and they grow medicinal plants there, and they work with the potentized water that they call dense water. And we were receiving patients. Their patients were coming for follow-ups at the farm. The doctors were there. We were getting training at the same time. And what stands out for me was at midday, they served 40 people, 40 of us, including patients, doctors, everyone, with the food that was grown on the farm. And we were all sitting around the same table. Everyone was at the same table. So we were able to actually share food. We were sharing knowledge. So this sharing or this collaboration was at all levels. We were out in nature. We were out on the farm. It was an outdoor setting. And so that in itself was also really nourishing. So again, they're just resourcing nature and the healing power of nature.
Amazing. Can you please, the two of you, post some of your photos of your trip to Cuba in our Homeopathy Hangout podcast Facebook group?
Sure,
I
Sure.
I just
love
want
to.
Would
I
love
want to
to.
see a photo of all of you sitting there on the farm having lunch together, and any other photos that you might have, please share it in the
Yeah.
Facebook
Yeah.
group. And just for the listeners, anybody can join. It's just called Homeopathy Hangout Podcast Facebook group. Can you tell a little bit more about water? Because before we start recording, you said dense water. I'm like, I can't remember our conversation, but when you said about the fourth phase of water, I'm like, oh, that's right. Because there was that scientist that has done this work, and I know there's a YouTube video. I can't remember his name, and I know that there's a book. Is that the book that's called The Fourth Phase of Water or something like that? Is that the same
Yeah.
thing?
Yes,
Can
Hmm.
you say a bit more
exactly.
about that and how they use the water?
Well, I mean, it's really Dr. Prado's the expert in that, but well, we'll do our best. But he also got very fascinated, and he actually invented some and invited some people from Japan to come over and talk more about that. And so they were, what they've realized is that dense water can be used to signal and potentize signals. So for example, if dense water is used with a homeopathic remedy, it makes the signal stronger, if you will. It like potentizes the signal that the remedy is already giving to the mitochondria. to the whole organism. And they actually were, it's so dense water, just so people understand, is actually found in nature. We find it in nature. We usually find it at the bottom of waterfalls because that's where it'll occur naturally. But you can also create it with a special machine, or as we learned to, with a special concoction of ingredients that are all natural.
Yeah.
But there's ways of making it. And the dense water is actually found inside our bodies too, in all of our cells.
So most of our body is 20% of our body weight is fascia. And what they found was that the fluid between the fascia is how messages are transmitted, because it's a crystalline, fascia is a crystalline matrix, so it can transmit and it can transmute information. So they're also studying fascia and how this is, because of the water that it's composed of, how this is also a means of transmitting information.
I think the massage therapist in you probably completely resonates with all of that. Hey.
I want to do a workshop on this. I'm passionate about fascia. Yeah. And they also realize that dolphins emit a certain electromagnetic.
And they're working with dolphins, for example, with children who have neurological issues. They bring them to swim with dolphins because they realize that when the children swim with dolphins, whatever the sounds that are emitting are actually working on the water in their bodies, which helps equilibrium and brings better health, right? So it's really interesting because you can also take dense water and then put it in the water with the dolphins, and then it becomes dolphin dense water. There's like all this stuff going on. But what's interesting is just to see how, once again, like homeopathy is another tool that can be added to all of these really innovative ways that are gentle and that are really more of a mirror and a reflection of, what we are in nature. So I think that this is what's really inspiring too.
Yeah. And our trip there was sort of a pilot project for what they're trying to do now in an area called Jovellanos. So they're trying to make Jovellanos a center to study epigenetic healthcare and use these different signals. So they're looking at ways to produce the remedies there, to produce what they call natural signalers, which are different plants. They're looking at ways to do, and they are actually doing trainings there. They're receiving patients, they're training interprofessionally. And so they're trying to make this a center for epigenetic study in healthcare.
And that's the
Holy moly.
project that's being developed in Cuba right now.
So future missions would be about going there in one place. Whereas we,
And
we traveled a lot when we went. So we went to the Children's Neurological, we went to the hospital, the university, the farm, and the delphinium to work with the dolphins. But now future missions are going to be concentrated in Jovellanos to really explore epigenetic health. Because for them, homeopathy, the scientific field of study for it is this epigenetic healthcare model.
Holy moly. So HTSF, do they go to different places? Hey, because I think I had, was it Emma Banks that, I wonder if that was the same
It,
organization.
it
yes,
is, yeah.
Oh, it is.
Emma
Okay.
Emma went to Honduras,
yeah.
and now because of the situation in Honduras, there are no other missions being planned for there. But what's really interesting, because of all the previous work, and Carla Marcellus was a large part of that, because of all the previous work, they've managed to set up centers and places where people are training each other, and
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 dispensaries.
dispensaries. And so despite the hardship, I mean, it's really an example, like even under duress and hardship, that they are continuing this work.
And that's the power of training communities, right?
Mm,
And not keeping it, just for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's also giving it back, you know?
amazing.
Like in the way we see it, I think that, like, for me, we have a lot of knowledge that we can share as homeopaths that we should be sharing, to get so that we can create these bridges and communities and help them really thrive, whether it be helping them treat the soil, helping them save the cow so that the family can survive. Like, these are things that are like important. So, and I think that like an organization like HTSF kind of answers to these needs without taking away the role of a homeopath. Like, homeopaths will always be needed and our expertise will always be needed. There's no way that we can ask like people that haven't studied homeopathy to understand our 8,000 or 10,000 remedies and how to prescribe a core remedy, all that stuff. but we can definitely give them tools that, can really support them in their journeys. So I think that's the message too, like, let's get creative, let's help each other out, let's collaborate between professionals too. Like, this is what HTSF is trying to do. Like, come, you're an acupuncturist, come, you're an osteopath, come, let's do it. In Cuba, there's homeopaths, there's osteopaths, there's acupuncturists, and what you're going to be learning from them and then from other homeopaths or other professionals, well, it's going to be interesting for you when you come back, because you're going to have possibilities.
So with HTSF, do they get all sorts of professionals from around the world? So it's not just homeopaths. So any, like you say, osteo or chiro or acupuncturist or whatever can get in touch with HTSF along with the homeopaths from all around the world and then go to Cuba.
Right now, that's what they're trying to integrate, but what they call the first line training, so the first 12 introductory remedies, I believe you have to be a homeopath to do that training. And they ask that if you want to go on a mission, you become a member of the organization first, and then you do the first line training. And then for every mission or project, there's a pre-training. So there is a commitment. So you don't just show up and say, I'm traveling with HTSF on mission. So membership, first line training, pre-training for any missions, and then you can go on the trip. Yeah.
And that's like, this is being all set up. So I just want to be clear that, it's a project that right now they have a space and they're doing it. And there's people that are actually going like this weekend, in February to do it. And they're planning on having like a second cohort, maybe in April of 2025. So we'll see how that works out. But theoretically, what they would love is for a place to be like a busting place where people can go multiple times a year, and professionals that aren't homeopaths can also participate, so that it's like a multidisciplinary collaborative space, right? Which is what we were talking about, like how they do the integrative healthcare over there.
And what they're setting up in Jovellanos will be a training center. So they are very much interested in Jovellanos. You don't necessarily have to be part of HTSF to train people interprofessionally.
So cool.
And to see patients. So
I do want to mention, though, the situation in Cuba is extremely difficult. So we don't know, like, Cuba is one of those countries where you just don't know how things are going to go. For example, when we were there 2 years ago, we could still get around, but now it's very difficult to find any type of petrol. So, stuff like that is always a challenge. And there's a lot of electrical outages, stuff like that. So even when we do talk about coming to Cuba, people do have to be aware. It's not like going to a resort,
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. And they don't know how long the power will be out for sometimes. So there's issues around refrigeration. So those are the realities.
But at the same time, that's what also makes it special, because you really can understand, what people face and what they can do with such dire circumstances. And you just see, it's just like, I'm in awe. Like, I remember just being in awe the whole time. I was like, well, this is amazing. How could you do this? But then, Dr. Prada would say, well, we don't have a choice. We got to figure it out. So we figure it out, and it took me a while. And I was like, yeah, that's right. It's because when you don't have electricity all the time and you don't have pharmaceuticals and so on, well, you got to figure it out, and you got to find things that work, and you got to collaborate. And so I think that we can learn a lot from that too.
Yeah.
Another reason why homeopathy is amazing, because I do remember them saying that with leptospirosis, one of the things was that, they couldn't, well, for one, develop a vaccine in time, but for two, refrigeration was a major issue. Like, how would you keep this vaccine refrigerated all throughout distributing to these millions of people? But with homeopathy, that's not a problem, which just is such a no-brainer. Why doesn't the whole world understand this?
Cuba is definitely a good place to kind of get an idea of how to do that, right? Because it is, right? And at this major level. So, it's worth going to Cuba just for that, bringing it back.
Can you tell us a bit about the remedies as well? Like you mentioned about the 12 remedies, but is there more than that? And is it specific to Cuba, or is it like, how were the remedies developed?
So the remedies were developed by HTSF, and Cuba has their versions of the HTSF complexes, as well as others that they're developing using what they call aromatic, so more plant-based medicines and honey. So there are what they call the first lines, that they're really like for emergency situations. And then there's a second line that's more about going in depth of how to treat certain conditions, so supporting immunity, let's say, or for hormonal imbalances, or for birth or chronic conditions like Crohn's or colitis. And so these trainings are offered through HTSF.
You can train with them online.
Yeah.
Okay. And those complexes, like can anybody in the world purchase them, or how do you get hold of them?
Right now, they're only distributed in Canada. The laboratory that makes them in Canada has affiliations in Switzerland, Schmidt-Nagel. And so they're looking to HTSF is looking eventually to have more international distribution. But they can only be purchased by homeopaths, and they can only be purchased by homeopaths who have done the training in the complexes.
And those first 12 remedies, so what sort of basic things do they cover?
Trauma, so physical and emotional trauma. There's one for upper respiratory, one for lower respiratory. There's one for intoxication, so food or waterborne pathogens. And they all kind of have the names that, it makes sense. Like one's called intox, one's called trauma. So very, very simple. So one is called drain for lymphatic drainage. One is called dram for like congestion. So yeah.
Well, there's SEP for
SEP for
yeah.
like septic
So
conditions.
there's 13 in all.
Yeah.
So and then depending on what's going on, maybe you'll just take one, or you could take two in alternating, So like you have one that's for inflammation, and then you have one that can maybe be very helpful at the starting of some type of viral symptoms, for example. You might be taking just one at the starting, and then maybe you'll all be alternating depending on what other symptoms you're having at that time. But it's all very like what I love it, because as a mom, it's like really easy, like when you're in the trenches and like everybody's getting ill, and there's tons of things happening, and you're like, oh my God, what do I do? It's easy to use, and it's definitely, I found that it was like, it really helps support the whole family through whatever is going on, especially when you don't have the time to look up things, or you yourself are ill and you need to help others around you too. So it's definitely, when we say first line, it's like definitely like emergency things that happen regularly, like acutes, right?
Acutes, yeah.
Amazing. And do they do much water dosing there? Like when you're out in the areas?
So it's like really something that is normally done is the water-based remedies, but there is also pellet form. So it's either or. I mean, obviously, when I go traveling, I like to take my pellets, like it's easier,
Yeah.
but in general, it's water-based is preferred if possible.
I can't wait to actually go listen back on this interview because my internet connection keeps dropping out. So you ladies are talking, which is wonderful, but I'm not hearing what you're saying because I keep dropping out. So I can't wait to re-listen to this and actually hear everything that you've said. Uh, so what else do you want to tell us about this organization and about what they're doing? I just don't want us to miss anything because it's been literally months of us trying to organize this chat. So I want to make sure that we squeeze all the goodness out of it. Like, what do you still need to tell us about this organization and how people can get involved?
Well, something that really touched me was because before getting online with you, we took time to speak to Dr. Prado, and so we'd understand his work a bit better, try to do some justice with this amazing work that he's doing. But what I found really touching is that we said, what do you want the world to know? What was your message? Like, we'll say it for you. And he said, my only message is thank you. Thank you, homeopaths, for coming and sharing your knowledge. And thank you for the collaboration.
Yeah. He was so sincerely grateful.
And I think that's important to share because a lot of homeopaths maybe sometimes doubt that they have a place, or that our medicine has a place. And, that type of gratitude can definitely shows you that we do have a place, and, how important it is that we continue collaborating and we just don't give up on, no matter what the circumstances are where we might be living, to continue with our mission. And Martine also had some really beautiful words when she said that, like it's a bridge and it's a tool.
Yeah, it's a tool to help support community development. That's really how she sees it. And she said like nature's or homeopathy is the way that nature signals itself through us. And she said, don't ever be limited by it. She said, homeopathy is limitless. She said it's just limited by the limits that we put on it, by the homeopath. And so that kind of vision that's being held by, the founder of HTSF and people in Cuba.
Yeah. And how she said also, homeopathy is the medicine of the past, the present, and it's going to be the mainstream medicine of the future.
I have not heard that one, but I absolutely agree. It certainly feels like there's just this incredible homeopathic revolution. People just feel so ready for it. I think they're just over all the suppression,
Yeah.
they're over all the band-aids, they're over their health complaints being ridiculed or not believed or not being listened to or so yeah, it's definitely the time. The mainstream medicine of the future. I love it.
Yeah. And I think we touched on that in Bali. I think we had the same feeling
Mm.
of potential that we had in Cuba
Mhm.
and
Yeah, and limitless.
limitless. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, for us, it was just we really wanted to be able to spend this time with you, Eugenie, because we wanted to get that message out for like all listeners, homeopaths, non-homeopaths, people are doing it and they're exploring and they're using it and there's amazing things happening. We might not always be aware of them, but they're there and every day. And it's been going on for a long time. That's why we're saying it's the medicine of the past also,
Yeah.
you know?
And it is bringing people together. And I think that that's also what is so healing for not just the people being treated, but for the people practicing, that we come together around this.
That really, for me, is the essence of what this podcast is about, is to get the message out there of what homeopaths around the world are doing and how homeopathy is being used and all the far-flung corners of the world. So I feel like this podcast is one of those ones that, for me, will always be the essence of what I want this podcast to be about. It's just sharing the incredible things that people are doing that many of us around the world just would have no idea about. But there's these pockets of homeopaths around the world doing unbelievable things that are complete unsung heroes. They're not the ones up on the stages getting awards or on social media with like hundreds of thousands of followers or this or that. They're the ones that are just in the trenches doing incredibly hard work, serving their community selflessly. And that really is the essence of, what this is all about, trying to get that message out there. So thank you to the two of you for sharing that with us.
Thank
And thank you for
you.
your persistence and perseverance when I had to cancel a couple of times. And any like final messages? Did you want to give us some quick links of where people can quickly look things up? That'll obviously also be in the
Yeah.
show notes, but maybe just mention us where people can learn more about HTSF and also your own private practices as well. And we will have in the show notes too, but just give us a quick rundown.
Okay, so for HTSF, people can just look online at HTSF Canada, and should take them to the site.
And for your own practices?
My website is livingbalancenow.com.
And my website is my name. So Manuela Santiago Teigeler.
Teigeler.
If you write Teigeler, you will always find me because it's one of those really rare names. But that's all my social media, everything is linked to that name.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do both of you see clients online as well, or do you mostly just tend to treat people in Canada? Or...
Both online, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, online.
All over the world.
That's the beauty of our job, isn't it amazing? Like I just can't believe that we're sitting here in a caravan and Esperance in Australia, and we're gonna head across to South Australia and all over, and I can just continue my work. It's wonderful. People keep saying, "Oh, you're enjoying your holiday." I'm like, it's not really a holiday. I'm still working. I'm just working in different locations because I'm a homeopath.
And the other link would be for the Cuba group and the work that they're doing there. So it's SEN Cuba. Now, the website is still in progress and it's in Spanish only, but I'm sure there are Spanish speakers that would be happy to look at it.
Oh, amazing. Oh, ladies, it was so lovely to chat with you. And isn't there just something magical about when you've met somebody in person and then when you meet up online? It's just different, isn't it? It's like, I
Yeah.
don't know. How do you describe
It's
that? I
another
don't know.
type of connection. It's
It
like
is.
we're already connected somehow. Like the
Yeah.
hearts have been close to each other. So
Yeah.
the heart still remember, even far apart.
Oh. So much
Thank you.
love.
It was an
So much
honor.
love to both of
Lots
you.
of love
Thank
to
you.
you too, and love to everyone out there. Love and light.